So question of the day, is the Sony 11mm f1.8 the solution to the 40% active stabilization crop? Let's see.
They don't think we can keep making hits about cameras. But I'm the cameraman. But I'm the cameraman. Stay creamy. Yeah, started on a 50 mil lens.
So if this is your first time coming to the channel, I'd like to welcome you. This is Lessons Learned with Cameras. My name is Willie. As you know from the last video, I was trying to decide if I was going to go with the Sony 11mm f1.8 or the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 or the Sony 15mm f1.4. The reason for me trying to make that decision was because I was trying to decide what would help counteract this 40% active stabilization crop that's imposed on your video when you use the ZV-E10. So as you can see by the title of the video, I went with the Sony 11mm f1.8 for a couple of different reasons. One being the fact that now with it being 11mm and with me pairing it up with the ZV-E10 and with me engaging active stabilization, that would put me at a 24mm-ish full frame equivalent. And that's taking into consideration the APS-C 1.5 crop also. That was my solution, what I came up with to combat all these crop factors with this particular camera. Do I feel it's 100% foolproof? No. There's always going to be some little glitch or issue. Now, kind of recapping on the last video I did, I thought about some things and I was kind of harsh on the 15mm f1.4 that Sony's coming out with when you compare it to the Sigma 16mm f1.4. Now the thing I could say, and I didn't really address it in the last video, was the fact that yeah, the 16mm f1.4, it does have some flaws. One main one that I noticed is a lot of focus breathing, which I know when you use a Sony native lens, most of them, you kind of, eliminate or reduce the amount of focus breathing that you have in your video. Okay, a caveat to that, except for the 24mm G Master, which is what I'm using right now to shoot this talking head part of the video. That has a lot of focus breathing, but I'm willing to compromise and accept that for the other qualities and the other attributes of the lens itself, that it's more than worth it for me for a G Master lens. So today I'm out here. I'm not going to waste a lot of time with the talking head video part because I got quite a bit of tests to do, but we're going to run the Sony 11mm f1.8 through a couple of tests with active steady shot, with no steady shot, with the gimbal, pairing it up against other cameras. So I just want to see how it performs. And I want to see if this was the right solution for the problem that exists with the Sony ZV-E10. Now, over the last week of me having the ZV-E10, I haven't had a lot of time to test the 11mm. I just got it earlier part of this week. I'm kind of out here right now in my backyard running some tests. So just going to do the video out here. It's a good day. It's supposed to be up to 100 today. So I want to hurry up and get this done so I can get back inside. And I didn't want to do the talking head in the studio because I didn't want to have to go down there and fiddle with my FX3 and try to get everything set up. I'm going to go ahead and start this video off with the field test. Okay, so for the first test, I'm going to use the Sony ZV-E10 paired with the Sony 11mm f1.8. I'm using the MT40 Ulanzi Bluetooth grip with the Rode wireless mic. So let's go ahead and walk and do this. Also, the active steady shot is engaged. So with the 40% crop, you're looking at about a 24mm-ish full frame equivalent. And just holding it normal. Now I think personally that this is the best solution for dealing with this crop. I won't really be able to tell how stable this is till I get it back in post and put it in Final Cut. But right now, this is what you're looking at with 40% crop and just hand holding it with the tripod. I don't think that looks that bad. Plus nowadays with my workflow, I really don't do this type of vlogging where I'm walking around holding the camera in front of me. But for what I need this lens for, which is mainly a low light, small compact lens, that was the main reason why I got it, but I also want to be able to have the option to vlog with it and be able to walk without having to get out a gimbal every single time. But this is what you get just straight out of it. Again, just using the digital stabilization built in the camera with the 11mm lens. And even I can put it out farther, but it just doesn't feel right. But that's if I wanted to put it out even farther. So for those of you that like walking around with the camera way out in front of you like that, it's doable, but you're going to reach muscle failure a lot quicker in your arms. See, I'm already shaking. So this is what you get. So for the second test here, I'm using still the ZV-E10 with the 11mm, but this time I have it on a gimbal and I'm using it without the active steady shot engaged. So that's what you get for your field of view. This is about a 16.5mm full frame equivalent. All the shaking's gone. And again, this is an option. I'm using the Zhiyun M2. Wouldn't recommend it, but if you're going to use a gimbal, I would say it's probably best to go with either the 2S or the M3. But I have this one down in my down in the studio area, but I don't use it a lot. Most people know I'm really not a gimbal person, but if I did put it on there for this particular setup, I mean, it's really light. It's just more of the time it takes for me to balance it and all that. I just don't have time for that. But this is what you get, 16mm, and you can see all that in back. Everything's pretty stable. And again, another option. But if you did still have the Zhiyun M2, it is manageable, it's doable. You can vlog with it, no issues. It can definitely handle the weight of this, because with a lens this small and light, I mean, it's like it's barely carrying it. I mean, it's not really making no issues with it. So that's what you're looking at. And again, that's pretty much with my arm fully extended. It gives you all, I can't even really, man, get all that back, touch from side to side, but that's the view you get right there. Still ZV-E10, 11mm lens, still using the gimbal, but this time I engaged the active stabilization within the camera with the 40% crop. So now you're looking at 24mm-ish full frame equivalent. And do you think that that's enough room for vlogging? Very light setup. For me, it would be a downfall, but the only downfall is using a gimbal. But this would be my personal alternative over using Catalyst Browse. So Catalyst Browse is just too glitchy for me. It's hit or miss. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Even when I follow all the rules of cranking up shutter speed, turning off all stabilizations, man, it's hit or miss. And the worst time to find that out is to get back from shooting something and you're in post and your video look like crap. It's shaky, and probably even more shaky with Catalyst Browse. I've had that happen a couple of times. That's why if I had to have stable footage like this, I would probably go with my gimbal just to play it safe. But again, M2 is a hard recommendation. I mean, it's hard to recommend it over the M3 and the 2S. But again, this is just what you get with it. 24mm, all that is in there. I think this is wide enough for vlogging, but again, it's a personal preference, and this would be doable for what I do. So for a bonus test, I'm going to use the Sony A7C paired with the Sony 11mm lens. And the purpose of this test is just to show you what the picture would look like if now you were able to use in-body stabilization with the Sony 11mm F1.8, which has no optical stabilization. And this is 16.5mm full frame equivalent. This setup is pretty light. This would be an option. I may even use it like this sometimes, just so I can have that 16mm field of view, because I think for all my full frame cameras, I don't have one that has a 16 millimeter field of view. So this is definitely another option, but just to show you what that looks like. And again, I'm just walking normal, just using the IBIS that's built in the camera with the 11 millimeter lens. Okay, now I'm doing a test with the 6100 paired with the Sony 11 millimeter. Wasn't planning on doing this particular test. Again, this is with the Zhiyun M2 crane. Everyone knows 6100 has no IBIS at all. This lens is not optically steady. So what you're getting right here is a 16 millimeter equivalent, or 16.5 millimeter equivalent. And that's what you get for the Sony 6100. Okay, this test is just a static test, just putting it on a tripod with the 11 millimeter and the Sony ZV-E10. This is the field of view you get when you engage the active stabilization within the camera. So this is the 40% crop. And as you notice with the left and right limits, which I would just use, like there's two trees here, you only see one because the other one's not in the picture in the frame. But I kind of use that as my left and right limits. So let me show you what it looks like without active stabilization engaged. And this is without active stabilization engaged. Now you can see the other tree on the right and you see the one on the left. So, I mean, it does give you more of a field of view going from the 16.5 full frame equivalent to the 24 millimeter full frame equivalent. So there is a difference there. It's just a matter of, does that make a difference to you? So there you have it. Do I feel the Sony 11 millimeter is the solution that I was looking for to counteract that 40% digital stabilization crop within the ZV-E10? I think it is. I mean, because I know my other alternatives would mean either I'm going to use a gimbal, and that would mean probably me having to purchase the M3. And I know how I already feel about gimbals, and I know a lot of times that gimbal is not going to get pulled out just because the time that I need it, I'm probably going to be very exhausted, not going to want to deal with it, and it probably is just something that I just want to pull a camera out real quick and get a shot. Now it's pretty much time for the real world use for the ZV-E10 with the 11 millimeter. I'll be using it here in the next 2 weeks when me and my wife go on vacation, definitely for low light situations. I just want the camera not to be able, I don't expect this camera to compete with my FX3, with my 24 millimeter G Master. I don't expect that. I just want to put that out there. But I want it to be able to somewhat keep up with it. You know, I will be bringing my FX3 because I trust that camera. This is the little brother to that camera, so I have to build that type of trust with this camera. And again, I'm not going to have such an unrealistic expectation of it. I know the shallow depth of field is going to be nowhere near a G Master with f1.4. I know for low light, I know the ISO is going to be a lot higher than it would be on my FX3 that has, in theory, dual ISO. So, but still, with that being said, I wanted just to be able to perform within its capabilities. It's not a replacement for my FX3. My FX3 is the one that I use to get me out of tight situations when it comes to low light shooting. But I do want this to be able to at least keep up with it, if that makes sense. So as usual, in closing, if you like this video and you want to see more like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you felt anything in this video was beneficial or useful, feel free to drop a like. And I'll be making more content, definitely dealing with the ZV-E10. I want to put it up against other cameras, put it in other situations, and see how it performs overall. My goal is I want to make this my go-to camera, my one that I can just grab and go, don't have to have a lot of accessories with it, just a camera that I can trust that it's going to do exactly what I need it to do. That's it, and I will talk to you later.